Hey, Wealth Warriors, are you ready to redefine wealth and master your money mindset? Welcome back to Women of Wealth. I'm your Gen X host, Holly Woods Gray.
And I'm your millennial host, Ali Ramo. And today's conversation is especially powerful for anyone who believes wealth is more than money. It's about leadership, service, and legacy.
Yes, absolutely. Our guest today is Dr. Nelva Lee. Dr. Lee is the founder and CEO of Concrete Building Financing, a seasoned healthcare and education leader, author, entrepreneur, and public service, just to name a few things of what she does. But she's going to go ahead and share her background with you. And we're going to have a great conversation today about leadership and entrepreneurship. Welcome to the show, Dr. Lee.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Ali, for having me on. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. On a personal note, I have been married to my husband and best friend for 25 years, and together we have 3 beautiful children. But on a professional basis, I am a serial entrepreneur. So I started my own vocational school about over 20 years ago because of a need in the industry. I was at the time the director of patient advocacy at Grady Health System, which is a large public hospital here in the state of Georgia. And in my department, we had interpreting services, but we could not find training programs for our interpreters. And so I brought it up to my CEO. I said, why don't we start our own? He passed on the idea. And so I ran with it. I had already had experience as an adjunct professor, and I was trained in curriculum development. So I took those skill sets and applied it to this business, and was able to do that for 20 years and became a leader in the medical interpreting industry. I was a subject matter expert and the first chair of the National Board of Certification for medical interpreters. And since then, I've sort of transitioned into just providing services, which is what I do currently. We have an Interpret AI company, which is an AI interpretation backed by human interpreters. But as you mentioned, Holly, I also have my Concrete Bill Financing company, which is the way I like to say a private sector solution to homeless problem, to the problem of high rents and high mortgages. And so we basically are a cryptocurrency backed by real estate. And so we provide condos that are rent to own so that your normal everyday person can afford to pay the rent.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, it sounds to me like you've had some leadership in many different roles, education, healthcare, business, public service. When you look back, what moments would you say most shaped your leadership philosophy?
So I really discovered that I had leadership skills very early on. I would say back in high school, I was the president of the French club, and I just recognized that was able to motivate people and inspire and organize well. And so I really, that informed a lot of the decisions that I made for my life. I remember when I started college, I was going to be in nursing school, and I had gotten a trade school certificate in high school as a nurse's assistant. So I was working already in the industry. And when I was talking to the nurses, my coworkers, I recognized just how little agency nurses had in hospitals. Doctors ruled like kings. And I recognized that I knew that my talents were more of a leadership role. And I didn't want to wait 20, 30 years to be able to exercise those talents. So I changed my major to healthcare administration. So my bachelor's, master's, and doctorate are all in healthcare administration. And right out of college, I was able to get management positions in healthcare. So it really is helpful to recognize your talents and hone them. So I've always taken additional leadership courses. I love reading leadership books. So it's just really been a lifelong, honing my talents in leadership.
I love that, you recognized that early on and you were able to just build upon that. I think a lot of people struggle with fear and doubt nowadays, or doubting themselves, whether that's what they want to do or if they're good enough to do what they want to do.
Mhm.
And so they always feel like they have to, pivot because they're uncomfortable. And so I love that you just set in that and you went with it and you just continued to build on top of that. You've worn a lot of hats:
Yeah.
CEO, professor, author, candidate. How are you defining wealth at this stage of your life?
I liked how you brought it up at the beginning that wealth isn't just about finances, right? Wealth is about your experiences and your things that you value. So at the end of the day, even very wealthy people will tell you that what they truly value is family and connection, right? And having meaning and purpose. And so it's always important to keep that front and center. So for me, I would say that I value the fact that I've been able to really instill those values into my children. Giving them a strong foundation. I have three beautiful children. As I mentioned, my oldest, he's a civil engineer. My two youngest are still in high school, but they're really very focused on being able to contribute into the world, and so that gives me joy. The fact that I've already instilled into them a desire for service and to be contributing members of society.
So
Wonderful.
as you were building, did
Mhm.
you did your idea of wealth or your definition of wealth, has it evolved and changed over time? Like when you were first starting to build your business, how has it changed?
So from the very beginning, I wanted my business, I envisioned it, let's put it that way, as a legacy business, something that my children would want to come to work with me someday and continue to build, and maybe even my grandchildren someday. And so I always saw that as a avenue or a tool that would be used for that purpose. And I did realize that my son came to work with me. He was my marketing director for a time. My stepdaughter came to work with me for a time. And so I do believe that we just have to have a vision from the beginning of what we see, our business becoming. It was, for me personally, it was never about just making money. Making money is nice. I love my vacations, ladies. I love to travel for sure. And it's nice to have, financial stability for sure. But if that's all you're working for, you're never going to have a moment where that's enough, right? There's never a number. People will tell you there's a number, and then once they get closer to that number, it moves forward, right? And so you should have some more intangible um, goals that define your wealth.
Yep, I totally agree. I mean, I always talk about I belong to several different women's groups, and I always talk about how when good women make good money, they can do good things in the world. So it's really
Love
never
that.
about making a number. It's more about, for me anyway, it's all about, how much can I give, not necessarily how much can I get. And you are currently a candidate for the Georgia Superintendent of Schools.
Yes.
What I mean, Allie and I spend our days in schools, pretty much every day. We work with
Okay.
educators, and
Wonderful.
that's our niche market. And so, what do you believe is missing most from today's education system?
So I can tell you the two areas that I'm focused on here in the state of Georgia. We unfortunately are falling behind in the educational rankings nationwide. Our current superintendent of schools has been in his position 11 going on 12 years and has only seen decline. So 70% of our fourth graders are not proficient in reading. 76% of our eighth graders are not proficient in math, and those are declines under him. And so that's one of the main reasons I came into this race. I'm not a believer of just sitting on the sidelines and just complaining. I believe that you should be the change that you wish to see in the world, right? A famous Gandhi quote.
Yes.
So two of my main initiatives. So the first one is I want to expand school choice so that parents are fully engaged in their children's education. So a little bit about my own educational journey with my children. My oldest had some autism. He was on the autism spectrum. And so he developed very early some developmental issues. So I homeschooled him for up to fifth grade and was able to provide him with an environment where he was able to blossom academically because he was gifted academically, and give him time to develop socially. And my youngest daughter, who we adopted from the foster care system of Puerto Rico, came to us not only with a language barrier, but also with a learning disability. And so we were able to, after a few months with her in public school and realizing that she just was not thriving in that environment, we were able to pull her out, put her in a Montessori environment where she thrived. And I believe that if parents had the resources and the tools, they would be able to make similar decisions or better decisions for their children. That's my one of my initiatives, is giving parents the opportunities to truly be engaged and give them true school choice for their children. The second is what I mentioned about vocational schools. So I was a CEO of vocational school. I was the recipient of having a vocational school certificate from high school, and how it really enhanced my career path. And I believe that all high schoolers should graduate not only with a high school diploma, but with a vocational certificate, so that they are workforce ready as soon as they graduate high school. And whether or not they're college bound, it really will just enhance their career. So if you're a college bound student, if you get a vocational certificate in the industry that you're planning to obtain a degree in, it will only serve to enhance that. It will be sort of like a built-in internship, if you will, for that industry, for that degree that you get. And if you're not college bound, it's a game changer, right? Because it gives you an actual career, and it allows you to be a full-fledged member, a contributing member of society.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important for the parents to be involved in their kids' education. I mean, we live in Nevada, so the education system here in Nevada is not very good. So our son goes to a private school, but we started at one private school when we got here. He was in second grade, and it just wasn't the right school for him. We moved him to a different school, and we love this school. We can see him thriving and everything. And there's just a difference when you have those choices that you can make for your kids. Like the first school we went to, they wanted to have us have him tested, even though we told him, like when we were in California, he was in a Spanish immersion program. He was fully immersed in Spanish every day. And so he didn't have the basics of English. And here in Nevada, they didn't have any of those programs. And so I went and had him tested like they asked us to do. And it turned out he had a very, high level of learning, much higher than like an average student. And I could have told him that just from watching him with, different things that we do as a family, whether that's play games or cards or whatever. I could tell them that he learned quickly, and it was just a matter of him learning the basics in English for him to be able to catch up. And now he's in sixth grade and he's doing great. He's, in some of the classes where he was struggling before, he's doing great, but that's because we put the time, energy, and effort into it. And, not all parents have the resources that we have. They're not able to put their kids in a private school. They have to stay with public, but they should have the ability to go in and change them to another school that would give them those vocational skills or give them what they're missing. Just because they don't live in a certain part of town doesn't mean they shouldn't have access to that, right?
Exactly. I'm in agreement. And one of the things that I'm really championing is a voucher. Okay, so if parents that don't have the means have a voucher, say for $8,000, similar to Florida, where they can take their child to a private school or take them to, a charter school, private charter, magnet school, homeschool, whatever environment they believe that their child will best thrive in, they should have the resources to do that. And so that's one of the things that I believe will change not only parents' ability to engage, but also the school system. Because right now, if every child is coming to you, there's no incentive to really try to meet their needs.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you have served on the Department of Community Health Board.
Correct.
How does healthcare access intersect with education and long-term wealth outcomes for families?
That is a great question. So for starters, I have always been working in a healthcare, in every single healthcare position that I've had, it's been an access position, where I've always been at the intersection of healthcare and access. As I mentioned, when I was the director of patient advocacy, and in my department was interpreting services, that was all about access. As a nursing home administrator, it's all about how to provide access. And so I would say that how that interplays with education is providing parents access to education resources and other learning environments for their children. And so being able to have that skill set and coming from the healthcare industry and being able to apply those tools and those resources to the education side, I think will be very important.
Mm. How do parents, I'm not a parent. I have two nieces and nephews, so I see my sister, navigating some of her children's needs as well. Um, but I mean, a lot of her resources have come from word of mouth from other
Yeah.
friends going through things. Um, so how do on a public education level, how are parents able to get resources for their kids right now? Like, are they just posted on government websites? How are there different programs helping different needs?
So that's my main concern right now with parents' lack of engagement, right? Uh, so from the education side, they're constantly complaining that parents aren't engaged. But then you just gave a perfect example of why it's so difficult to engage, right? Because the information isn't centralized. There's no one place that they can go to get the information that they need. And then when they do know, for example, here in the state of Georgia, we have a form of school choice. Uh, the vouchers have so much red tape to them, it's very difficult to navigate. So, for example, you have to not be in private school or homeschool to be eligible. Your child has to be in the bottom 25 percentile academic schools for you to be eligible. And then you only get $6,500. And then you have to find a private school because they can only use it at private school. You have to find a private school that will accept the voucher. Not all private schools accept it. So it's so much rigmarole for parents. And mind you, this is not their full-time job. Most of them have jobs. And so why are we making it so difficult for parents to be engaged? That's one thing that we can easily change. Now in the day and age of Google and ChatGPT, we can make this process a lot easier for parents. I believe that an engaged parent leads to a successful child. So Holly, you were a perfect example of that. You were engaged with your son, and you realized he wasn't doing well in this setting, so you moved into another, and still wasn't doing there, and until you found the right fit for him. If you have an engaged parent, you will have great outcomes, regardless of what challenges the child presents with initially. And so it's imperative that we have engaged parents.
Absolutely. Well, you've authored a couple different books. Stay and Fight. I was just reading the introduction to that, and Be the Superhero of Your Own Story. You have a very strong faith that guides you.
Correct.
And in leadership and public scrutiny, how do you feel like leaning on that faith is the best way for you to handle those challenges that might come up?
It is my secret sauce for sure. It is. Having a strong faith is such an anchor, especially in a world where things come at you very quickly and out of left field, and especially when you're putting yourself out in the political sphere where you're subject to criticism and scrutiny and all of the above. So it's very important to me. My faith is my guide. It's like I said, my anchor. And in many times it gives me just peace. I don't have to worry about circumstances coming my way that might, throw someone else off kilter. It just keeps me centered and grounded. I can't even tell you what my life would be like if it wasn't for my faith. For sure. It's been my one constant.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We're actually putting together an anthology book right now about the Proverb 31 woman, and about how that is a guide really from a mother to a son about how to find a worthy woman.
Yes.
And so we have 20 authors that are working on their stories, and we're going to be publishing that in May.
That's wonderful. That's one of my favorite Proverbs. And then, and she was a composite, right? It wasn't just one woman. She was a composite of different women. But it's always so refreshing whenever I read that. because she was no little wallflower, right?
Not at all.
She was a force to be reckoned with, and so it just gives me so much encouragement.
Yes. I
Whenever I
mean,
read.
and when I was writing the opening for this book, one of the things that I wrote about was that she was an entrepreneur before we even had the word for entrepreneur. You know, I
Exactly.
mean, she found a field, she purchased it, she planted a vineyard, and then she also took care of her family too. So all of us that are working in these different ways in these different areas, you know, our vineyard, one of the gals actually wrote about this. She's a CPA in her day-to-day life, but she wrote about how like a vineyard now might be your insurance business, or you're running for superintendent, that might be the vineyard that you're planning, right? But that, you know, all of these jobs that we have, or these places that we put our time and attention, they don't just develop overnight. You know, it takes time. It takes time for grapes to grow, just like it takes time for a business to grow. And she very eloquently puts the vineyard in perspective with a bunch of different examples of how a vineyard could be today. You know?
I love it. I love that. Yes. And I love the fact that the Proverbs 31 woman took care of her household. You know, her husband was regarded highly because of her. You know, her children call her blessed. You know, it's definitely something to aspire to be. For sure.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, what advice would you give a woman who feels called to start a business? She may, or, you know, starting a family, or she's, you know, she has a family and wants to start a business, but a little fearful of the cost and the risk. What advice would you give her?
So as far as risk is concerned, I've always been a believer to, you know, I don't want to arrive safely at death. So there was a quote once, you know, you don't want to arrive, you know, safe to your end. You want to have some risk, and it's what makes life just, you know, interesting and enjoyable. Now, not crazy risk, but definitely do your homework. Make sure that you're consulting everyone that needs to be consulted. Make sure that you are in communication with your partner about it. But risk is part of life. No risk, no reward. It's true. Now, as far as you mentioned, if she has children, is that what part of your question?
Yeah, like maybe she's already a mother and maybe working at a W-2, but she's got a vision or a dream that she wants to pursue.
For me, actually, I found it to be much more flexible. When I started my business and was homeschooling my son, it really was an ideal situation for me. Because as a business owner, you have control over your day, right? You're in control of your schedule. And so I found it to be much easier to be the type of mother that I wanted to be, because I was a businesswoman, because I was a business owner. And so we have this idea that when we have a business, it's going to take up even more of our time. And that can be true initially, the first few months or maybe even years. But once you start delegating things to other people and you become a true CEO, you're not doing everything on a day-to-day basis. And you have a lot more freedom of time, and your schedule is it's much more manageable because you are in control of it. So I would definitely encourage everyone that feels a calling to be a business owner to go into it. You know, utilize your SBA, your local SBA, Small Business, you know, Administration. They have wonderful classes, a lot of resources. Utilize them. Make sure that you come up with a good business plan, and make sure that you can bootstrap as much as you can initially. But yes, I would not, you know, I would not have it any other way. I love the fact that I've been an entrepreneur. It fulfills me on so many different levels, right? Because you have to be very creative, and you have to be able to pivot, and it provides you with leadership opportunities. I highly recommend it.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. You were talking about the concrete building finance being a crypto that's backed by real estate. Correct. And is helping some of the homeless in your area. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how people can find out more information if they're interested in connecting with you? Because I'm sure it's very interesting, and you know, it's also a great cause.
So I believe that the current crisis that we have with apartment buildings or apartments just being, the rent skyrocketing, right? It's a issue because a lot of investment banks came in, private equity came in to communities such as Atlanta, bought up all these, these apartment buildings and then raised the rent, right? Astronomically in some cases. And therefore, we're having these crises of homelessness with people that are fully, working full time and can't afford rent. I think that's, immoral in my book. Okay. And so I figured private sector broke it, private sector can fix it. And so not knocking or taking away from government agencies, with the various programs that they have for affordable housing. But my idea is what is more of how can the private sector address this issue. So if you're familiar with Divvy, which they do rent to own homes, right? And they basically just work with someone with their budget and provide them with a mortgage that is within their means, but part of the mortgage goes towards a future down payment. So it's very similar concept, but with condos. So I would come in, take over a commercial property, convert them to condos, and have them as rent to own condos. And therefore, because it's a condo, it's going to be a much smaller mortgage, if you will, and much more affordable on a 30-year mortgage basis for your average person. Not only will they be able to afford it, but they're building equity, right? And so it gives them a lot more stability and ownership. And again, it's private sector broke it. I believe the private sector can fix it. And the crypto portion of that is that it allows for the democratization of being able to afford real estate for those, because you're tokenizing the real estate. So it's sort of like a share of a real estate, similar to a REIT, if you're familiar with REITs, but REITs are not very accessible to the common person. So this would be something that is very reasonable in price because it's going to be a smaller amount that you have to fork over to be able to have access to real estate ownership.
Excellent.
And they can find more information at concretebuild.org.
Okay, great. So it's a nonprofit as well.
It's not a nonprofit. It is a for-profit.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But like I said, the private sector broke it. The private sector can fix it.
Okay, great.
I like that. Capitalism doesn't have to be evil. Like you can be building a business, but also supporting people in need.
Correct.
Who need homes. So I think that's
They're
amazing.
not mutually exclusive, believe it or not.
No, they're not.
I love that. Well, before we get to the lightning round, is there anything else that you wanted to share? And if someone wanted to get in contact with you outside of your housing project, where can they find you?
So my website is drnelvalee.com. That's drnelvalee.com. And I have my books linked there. I have my social media handles linked there, speeches, podcast interviews, all kinds of stuff. Fun stuff.
Awesome. Amazing. Okay, so we're going to head into the lightning round. I will ask their short answers. Some of them are one-word answers.
Okay.
You ready?
Sure.
All right. So one word to describe your leadership style.
That's a hard one, Allie, because I do change my leadership towards my staff differently based on the person. So just very similar to how I'm a different mom to all three of my children. I'm very different leader depending on the person. So for my employees that are self-motivated, I am very laissez-faire. I'm very hands-off. I just give you some guidance and let you run with it. For those that are not self-motivated, and there's lots of people that are not self-motivated, I give a lot of guidance. I hold their hands a lot more. Not micromanager, but I'm very much involved. And so very different leadership styles depending on the person.
Okay, I've got your word. Flexible.
Okay.
Coffee or tea?
Tea every day. I love it. Yes.
Your go-to productivity hack?
Making sure that I get a good night's sleep.
Sleep is very important. A book every female leader should read?
I believe every leader should read this. It's Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yep. We definitely say that in we share that book in our agency too.
Awesome.
What's a leadership myth you wish would disappear?
Oh gosh, that if you're a female leader, that you have to be a B or whatever other negative connotation. I believe you can just be loving and caring and still be an effective leader.
Amen.
Mhm.
If you could sit down with any woman of wealth from the past or present, who would it be?
So one of my favorite people is Condoleezza Rice. I want to have an interview with you, Condi, and maybe we can sit down and have some tea.
Yeah, I noticed the golf on your website. So maybe you guys could go play a round of golf together.
There you go. I love to play. Oh, yes.
Oh, well, it was so lovely having you. Thank you for coming on, Dr. Lee.
Thank you for having me. This was a pleasure.